All right, we camera talking today. This one setting could ruin your footage, or maybe photos, depending on what you're doing. But it's difficult to say because the situation would have to kind of present itself. But if you crank your ISO high, and then you do other things with your settings to make your exposure darker. So let's say you put your ISO at like 8,000 on a camera that's not really good at doing low light, and then you're like, this is really bright, so I'm gonna make it darker. So I'm gonna like crank my shutter to like f22 to make it darker. And then it's like, oh man, why does my footage look so noisy? Well, your footage probably looks noisy because your ISO is in the stratosphere. Calm down. But essentially it's like that ISO, especially on the older cameras, might be a rough time. It might be a bad time, rough story. So again, when you're setting your settings, try to make one of the last things that you increase is your ISO. Depending on the camera, depending if it's full frame or micro four thirds APS-C, but even older full frame, as I'm kind of learning with the Canon 5D Mark II right here, is that older full frame might not even be super good by modern standards if you really are kind of pushing it, right? So keep that in mind when you're gearing in your settings. First of all, look up what your base ISO is for your camera if it has one. Try to keep it there. Again, you don't have to, but if you keep it at the base ISO, as far as I've heard, that's when the image is going to look the cleanest. I could be wrong about that, but I think that that's how it works. Beyond that, then from there, like set it at base ISO if it has one. Then gear in your other settings like your aperture, shutter speed. You know, try to light your scene if you can. Right, these different things can help. Right. And a lot of it might come down to if you can light your scene, because you might just be able to use an older camera and just get some good stuff out of it just because you are lighting your scene well enough. And again, with these older cameras, more light is probably better than less. With most cameras, more light is going to be probably better than less. Again, it depends on the vibe and the mood and the stuff and the setting that you're going for. Can you always light your scenes? Not necessarily. If you're doing event videography or event photography, it might be like super inconvenient or just not happening when it comes to lighting your scene. If you're a photographer, maybe you got a flash, maybe you don't want to use a flash, depending on the scene, you know, stuff like that, right? So on that, when it comes to that, you might be trying to essentially shoot like the silhouettes of people, right? So if you got like a bunch of lights in the background, you might either want to try to angle it so that, you know, the lights are kind of in the background and that contrast with the person's silhouette and shadow, so it still kind of looks like something's happening that looks kind of cool, and you don't have to crank your ISO and get it all like, you know, what's the word, noisy, you know. Again, it's just kind of trial and error. You try to do the best with it you can. Sometimes maybe you just gotta crank the ISO and it looks messy, but maybe you just like, I heard from this one person to just make it black and white if you have to crank your ISO and it gets super noisy. Credit to whoever said that on YouTube or wherever I heard that, because like that might be kind of genius, and the client or the person that you're doing it for or whatever, they might not really notice that that's what you did. And again, like, don't think of it from that, or try not to think of it like that, but essentially just like, if you only have this one shot, and in order to get it bright enough where you can kind of see what's going on, it looks really noisy when it's in color, but then you make it black and white and it's like, oh, this just kind of looks like vintage black and white footage. This actually kind of looks like kind of good or kind of usable, or it's got a vibe to it. You know, it's like you've kind of used the creativity to save the shot, maybe. You could, you know. But anyway, try to like think about it in a proper way, you know. So yeah, consider trying to do other things than just cranking the ISO. You know, it might have seemed like a good idea at the time, but once you look at it on the big screen, you might be like, ugh, depending on how good or bad it goes. But anyway, so again, watch that ISO, learn about your camera, look at low light tests or test it yourself, whatever, kind of think about it, keep that in mind when you're filming and doing stuff out in the field. Alright, thank you for joining Camera Talk. If you got any questions about cameras, you want to learn more or whatever, I got some courses and stuff in my Skool community. If you got questions, feel free to hop in the Skool community, ask the questions, right? Ask them, and I'm there. Right now running a 7-day free trial, right? Camera Talk on Skool, link in description. Thanks for watching.